So the majority of suffering which we experience is self-made. We make our own suffering. And that might be met with some resistance when I say that. Some people would probably disagree with that and say, no, no, no. I had my car broken into yesterday. I lost my job. My boyfriend left me. So these things are making me unhappy. But then when you take it further by a level or two, you'll see that it's actually how your mind is, or what your mind is telling you about that situation which is causing the suffering. So if your car was stolen, your conditioned mind will probably be telling you how bad the situation is and how frustrating that it's happened to you. And now you're going to have to call the insurance and then get a courtesy car and you can't get to work. So your mind is telling you how bad it is. So that's where the suffering is generated. The actual incidents which happen in life, they don't cause any suffering. They could be a trigger for suffering, but the weight of suffering is generated by the mind, which leads us nicely onto the identification with thought. By that I mean you see yourself in thought, or you take thought to be rules, facts, laws, when really they're just bits of information. So you can see how when we start to practice a certain thought pattern, such as I'm a nobody, I'm no good, life's rubbish, when we start to practice that, it starts off as a thought, but especially when we back up that thought with an action, it becomes reinforced. And the thought is no longer just a bit of information. The thought is now ranked in my conditioned mind as a fact, as a rule, something that I need to obey. So you could see how a practical example would be doing a presentation at work. Quite a common fear for a lot of people to experience, really. So you can understand the conditioned mind could be saying, well, I've never been good at public speaking. I get really nervous. I feel like everyone's watching me. So I'm going to try to, maybe the boss won't mind if I do mine tomorrow, or he might forget altogether. Or I might just call in a sickie on that day and I won't do my presentation. And then when you withdraw from that event, a sense of comfort is experienced, a sense of relief. Thank God for that, I don't have to do the presentation anymore. And you can see how it's the narrative in the mind which has created the person to withdraw from that situation. And now, because it feels good, they will be more inclined to repeat in the future. So when you're identified with thought, you believe what your mind is telling you, the conditioned mind. And the conditioned mind is essentially your opinions, your judgments, your likes, your dislikes, things you enjoy doing, things you dislike doing. So when we're not fully aware, it's easy for the conditioned mind to take over, and we run on autopilot and the conditioned mind takes over. So when you get into a car and you put your seatbelt on, you're not thinking, I need to put my seatbelt on. Your hand just goes and you do that. And when you lock your front door, you're not thinking, how do I do this? Your conditioned mind thinks that you don't have to, which is really useful in a lot of instances. But where it's not useful is when a life-denying behavior or a life-denying thought pattern emerges out of the conditioned mind and we follow it and we repeat it. So, identification with thought. We grow up with this storytelling mind which labels things and it observes things and it tells us he's a nice boy because he gave me, one of his chocolates. She's not a nice teacher because she told me off, and the mind learns and we respond to that voice in our head because we haven't developed awareness yet. And most people, and I often say this to clients who I work with, I don't take any gratification out of saying this. But most people aren't aware of what's happening in their minds. For most of the time, they're not aware. So by that I mean, a thought emerges, they follow the thought, almost instinctively. There's almost a compulsion. There's an element of momentum to follow whatever I'm being told. But with awareness, as in, I can see that pattern's here again. I can see that destructive thought has arisen, which is causing me to engage in that negative behavior. With awareness comes an element of choice. So awareness is so important when it comes to disidentification or disidentifying with thoughts. And you can see how when you're able to do that, when you're able to disengage with thoughts, life becomes a lot more, I don't like using the word control, but you're much more in control because you're no longer at the mercy of thoughts and thinking. There's almost a slave and a slave master dynamic going on in most people's lives every day, where they're simply acting out what they did yesterday or the day before. But with awareness, which is something I'll cover in another video, with awareness, you're given that opportunity to choose not to follow that thought, not to become completely like gravity, like it pulls you, the mind pulls you in, and you become engaged in that incessant stream of thought, constantly going. So essentially, we want to be disidentified with thought. Ideally, we want to use the tool of thought as opposed to thought using us. So there's a massive difference there. You know, you and I can plan what's happening tomorrow. Fine, there's nothing wrong with that. And then we return back to the present moment. But when thought is using us, when thought is possessing us, we stay in that future moment. We could plan what's going to happen tomorrow, but then the conditioned mind has taken us into, well, what if that happens? And what if you have to do a presentation? What if it goes wrong? And because we're so identified with thought, we believe it. And then we start to feel the emotions that you'd feel if you were actually experiencing that moment. So immense freedom is experienced when we're able to disidentify with thought.